Hi everyone, hope you all are doing well. Welcome back to our channel. This is the second video of the entire series, which is for Microsoft Sentinel APIs. And in this video, I'm going to showcase how you can access Microsoft Sentinel API through Postman and PowerShell. Now, the key aspects that I'm going to cover in this particular video is creation of Entra ID application, creation of client secret, using authorization code flow with Postman, using client credential flow with PowerShell. Now, there is a specific requirement for client credential flow, and that is this particular application that we will be creating. We will assign a role to that particular application depending upon our requirement, depending upon what exactly we are trying to do with the API. Okay, so let's say if we are performing only read operations, then the role assignment should be Microsoft Sentinel Reader. If I'm going ahead and performing any change to a specific incident, then I'll choose the respective permission, let's say Microsoft Sentinel Responder. So fundamentally, in client credential flow, the application should have permission instead of user. Now, these are two videos which are created long back. The very first one is authorization code flow. This explains how this authentication process works with Azure Active Directory or Entra ID. And this particular video explains how application authentication works with Azure Active Directory or Entra ID. I will be adding these two links in the description. Please go ahead and watch these videos. It's just my recommendation. This will give you a lot more idea in terms of how exactly things are working. Okay, so let's get started. The very first step is to create the application itself. And for that, I have opened my Entra ID console. And now I'm going to click on app registration. And then I'm going to click on this option of new registration. And here I'm going to name my application as, let's say, CW Azure API, which is concepts work. And here I'm going to say web. And here I'm going to type HTTPS localhost. Okay, that's it. And I'm going to click on register. Now, we also need a client secret to be created so that this application can be used. Okay, but before that, let me explain how exactly things are going to work fundamentally. Okay, so if I talk about authorization code flow fundamentally, wherein we have to access Microsoft Sentinel API through Postman, we need client ID, client secret, authorization endpoint, and token endpoint. Now, fundamentally, Entra ID has an authorization endpoint and a token endpoint. And the moment we provide this detail in Postman, let me just walk you through quickly how exactly the authentication process is going to work. The first step will be reaching authorization endpoint, from which a code will be given. And then this code will be used to request a token for the specific user, because the moment you reach token endpoint, user will be prompted to give credentials. And once this process is completed, then we have the token. Now, this token is something that we are going to use in each and every request that I'm going to send to Microsoft Sentinel. Now, for those of you who have seen the last video as well, you will be able to relate what exactly I mean by this. These are all different resources that can be accessed for Microsoft Sentinel. Okay. So now let me switch to my machine where I will be installing Postman, and we'll get started. Okay, so I'll open my browser, and here I'm going to just type download Postman. I'm going to click on the very first link itself, and then here I'm getting this option of downloading Postman on Windows. I'll click on that, and it is showing me download will begin shortly. So it takes a couple of minutes depending upon your network connectivity or depending upon your machine. So you can see right now the Postman is downloaded, and I'm going to install this particular application. Now, practically I could have skipped this part, but based on the comments, based on the request that I have seen in the past, usually the audience expects each and every step to be covered in a lot more detail. That's why I'm showing you end-to-end process, everything from scratch, so that you can access or you can perform everything that I'm showing on this particular video. Okay, now you can see I'm getting this prompt to sign in with one of my account. So what I'll do is I'll choose my option of continue with Google, and I'll sign in with my account. And once the Postman console is opened, I'll resume the video. Okay, perfect. So I'm signed in now, and this is the console, the very first set of options that you will get once you have installed Postman. Okay, to make things exceptionally simple, all you have to do is click on this option of new and then click on HTTP. That's it. This is the console where we will be reaching our endpoints. Okay, now I'm going to click on this option of authorization, and then I'm going to click on this option of auth 2.0. Now, as you can see, it's asking me for several details here, which we will be capturing from the browser itself. So the very first step is to give your token a name that you will be requesting. So I'm just going to name it as, let's say, Azure Sentinel. Okay. Now here, if you see, it's asking me grant type, which is authorization code and client credentials. So these are the two options that we are going to choose. So I'll keep the first one here, and then I'm going to give my callback URL, which is https localhost. Now, why I am giving this? Because if you remember, when I was creating the application, okay, then I have given this value as my callback URL. If you want to verify, you can just click on the manifest option of your application and scroll down, and you will see the link listed here, which you have given while you are creating the application. Okay, so now I'll come back to my machine and let's see what it is asking. The very first option is auth URL. Okay, so for that, go back to your Azure portal, click on overview of your application which you have just created, and then click on this option of endpoints. Okay, now from here, copy the one which is v1.0. okay, now this is the one, auth 2.0 authorization endpoint v1. Copy this one. There are very specific reasons why I'm saying this, because this endpoint does not expect scope. Now, again, if you have seen those two videos, all these things will make a lot more sense. However, for the scope of this particular video, you have to select the one which I have selected, which is login.microsoftonline.com, then your tenant ID, auth 2, and authorize. Now, the next URL that you need is access token URL. For that, I'll go back to my browser, and this time you have to copy this one, which is auth 2.0 token endpoint v1. Just copy this URL and come back to your machine and access token URL. Now you can see it's asking for client ID. I'll again go back to my application, and from here I have to copy this value. Okay, so I'll click on this option of copy. Let me just, yeah, I have copied client ID, and I'll go back to my machine. This is my client ID, and now I'll come back, and now I will create client secret, because whenever you create a secret, it is shown only once. Okay, so I'm going to click on add, and I'm going to copy this value, and I'll again come back to my machine and I'll paste this value here. Okay, now everything looks good till this particular point. However, if you have to access Azure Management API, then there is a specific parameter that you have to pass in the request, and that's what you're going to give here, which is token request, and in the key you're going to type resource. Okay, and here you have to type management.core.windows.net. okay, so this is the value that you have to type. https management.core.windows.net. Let me put it here so it's visible. It's management.core.windows.net. This is the value that you have to pass. Okay. Now I'm going to click on get new access token, and I'm expecting that this authentication should fail. Okay. Or we will not be able to access the management APIs because the permission is not granted yet. But let's just see. So I'm signing with my account, and now I'm going to click on accept. View console. You can see invalid resource. Okay. So the very first error that we have got, let me show you this. Okay. Unauthorized client, description is this: invalid resource. The client has requested access to a resource which is not listed in the requested permission in the client's application registration. Okay. So I'm intentionally not doing everything right just to make sure that you guys can fix if at all you get any error. Okay. So now let's see how we are going to fix it. For that, go back to your browser where you have created the application. This is the one. And now click on API permission. Click on add a permission and then click on Azure Service Management. Click on this and then click on this option which says user impersonation and click on add permission. Now here, click on this option of grant admin consent for concepts work. This will grant admin consent for user impersonation. You could have also granted from here, but I'm just showing you the direct methods. While you're doing it for production environment, make sure you choose these settings wisely. So for now, let's come back to our machine. And I'll close this. And again, I'm going to click on this option of get new access token. This time it will not prompt me because the credentials are already cached. And as you can see, I got the token. And now if I want, I can copy this particular token and I can go to jwt.ms, or if you want, you can go to jwt.io, with whichever you feel comfortable, and you can see I have the token now. Okay, now this token can be used to access any endpoint of Microsoft Sentinel. Okay, so now let's do something. Let's just try to access the URL which I was showing you in my last video. Let me open that in a notepad. Let's break it down first in terms of how exactly that is created, and then things will make a lot more sense. Okay, so this is the URL that I've shown you. If you remember, this is the base URL which is never changed, and then you have subscription, my subscription ID, resource group, my resource group name, and then I have my workspace name, and then providers, Microsoft Security Insight / data connectors. And then you see this API version. Okay, so now let's just go back to Postman and paste this URL here and click on send. And let's see, authorization header is missing. Okay, I'll close this. I think it should be here. Available token Azure Sentinel. Okay, the token was not selected, and now I'm going to click on send and let's see whether we are getting the response or not. Perfect. You can see I am getting the details of all the data connectors which exist in my Sentinel instance. Okay, so this is how you will be accessing different resources through Postman. The method that I've shown you right now is authorization code flow. I repeat this again. It's authorization code flow. Okay. Now, if you guys also remember that in my last video, I have shown you that all you need to do is change this particular section. Let's say I do now alert rules. And let's see if I get any response. Perfect. You can see now I'm getting all my rules listed over here. Okay, these are all analytical rules which exist fundamentally. Okay, so now let's talk about the second method, which is accessing Microsoft Sentinel through client credential flow. In this, the process is exceptionally simple. The very first request will be directly sent to token endpoint. Then we will get the token and we will use this token to access all the respective resources. It is that simple. Nothing complicated here. Okay. So now I'll go back to Postman, and here I'm going to change this to client credential. Okay. And I have this URL of token automatically selected. You remember in our last fundamentally method, there were two URLs which were getting used. The moment I selected client credential, I can only see token endpoint here. That's it. And now I'm going to click on get new access token, and I will click on proceed, and I will click on use token. Or let me do something. Let me firstly delete all the tokens here. Okay. And then again, let's just request a new access token. Click on proceed, and I'll click on use token. Now it's again highlighted here, and I'll click on send. The expected behavior is it should fail, and obviously it will fail because now understand, in the last attempt that we have made in terms of accessing the API, what we were doing is the access was actually consented by one of the user who is actually global admin. Okay. But now this application itself is trying to read the information directly, and that's not possible. Okay, because the application fundamentally does not have any permission. So as you can see, it shows authorization failed because the client, which is this with object ID this, does not have authorization to perform action, and it is also showing me which action is required. Okay, over the scope, which is my subscription. Now the question is how exactly we should fix it. Again, I'll come back to my browser, and this time I'll go to subscription. And here I'm going to select my subscription, and then I'm going to click on access control IAM. And then here I'm going to assign a specific permission to the application which we have just created. I'm repeating this again and again, and I'm emphasizing on this a lot because obviously there are reasons why this method works in a specific manner altogether. Your application is accessing a resource directly, so your application should have permission. Now here I'm going to click on select members, and here I'm going to type the name of our application, which is CW-Azure API, and I'll click on select. Now, as we move along with this playlist, I will also show you how you can save this client ID and client credential in a key vault, and then you can use a managed identity to access the key vault first, and then request token, and then access the Azure API. For now, I'm showing you all these methods because at times when you are, let's say, defining a script or you are trying to automate something, you can use these credentials directly in the script. Let's say it's to test some behavior. Okay. So now I'll come back to my machine. The permission is assigned. And then again, just to make sure we don't miss anything, I'm going to delete all the current tokens. And then I'm going to request a new token. I'll click on proceed. I'll click on use token. So when you click on use token, that token gets added here. I think this is something which I've not done when I was showcasing the authorization code flow. So the moment we selected the token, everything started working. Okay. So now I'm going to click on send, and let's just see whether we get any response. Perfect. So you can see now I am getting again the list of all the analytical rules, and this time it's only the application which is used. Perfect. So we have covered both the options of authorization code flow and client credential flow with Postman. Now let's quickly get started with PowerShell as well, so that I can show you how you can access these APIs with the help of PowerShell. Okay. So I've launched PowerShell ISE, and now I'm going to click on view, and then I'm going to click on show script pane on the right. Now, let's take a quick recap in terms of what exactly we were doing in Postman. Okay. The very first thing is we were trying to provide all the details which were related to endpoints, client ID, and client credentials. Okay. So the very first thing that we will do in PowerShell is to query my endpoints. Now, fundamentally, ChatGPT is there to give you all the code always. However, at times it's better if you know things, slightly more detailed way, because we all know how ChatGPT hallucinates, and at times it creates parameters which don't even exist. Okay. So the question is, from where exactly I got this URL, okay, which is login.microsoftonline.com conceptswork.in. Okay, so this is the URL again, which will be available in the endpoint section. So I'll go to Microsoft Enter ID, I'll click on app registration, and then I will click on the application which we have just created, and I'll click on endpoints. Okay, so here, if you'll scroll down, it will show you this particular option of OpenID Connect metadata document. If you copy this link and try to access in the browser, it will give you the list of all the endpoints which exist for your directory. Okay, so you can see this is my token endpoint, this is my URI endpoint for keys, this is again the issuer of my tenant, and you can fundamentally find a lot more details apart from just getting the token endpoint. However, what we need is just the token endpoint. Okay, so let's just quickly initiate this request, and let's just see what all we get in response. Okay, you can see I'm getting everything listed over here which I was seeing in the browser. Now what we need is this particular section, right? Now apart from this, what we also have to send is the end-to-end template, which was kind of client ID, client secret, and everything, right? So what I'll do is I'll capture the token endpoint first from this particular variable itself, and then here I'm kind of defining a new hash table fundamentally, wherein I'm giving all these values, and then I will be sending this in the body. Okay, so here I'm going to give my client ID. Now with this new feature of Postman, you cannot directly copy until and unless you click on the view option. Okay, so this is my client ID, and this is my client secret. This is it. And now if you remember, I was specifically mentioning in the presentation itself that with client credential flow, all you need to do is you have to send these details directly to token endpoint. And that's exactly what I'm doing. So here I'm saying Azure token URL invoke -rest method, go to token endpoint, post this particular body, and in the response you will get an access token. Okay, so let's just run it once. Okay, and now here let me show you Azure token URL variable. You can see this one, from this particular variable I'm accessing this access token. You can see that's exactly what I'm doing. Okay, now the next step is to go ahead and access data. Okay, so for that, let's create a variable and name it as, let's say, data connector. Okay, and here I'm going to give the URL that I was accessing through Postman, which is this one. I'll copy this, I'll come back to my PowerShell, and I'll paste this value here. Okay, So this is alert rules. Let's just change it to data connectors. Okay. And now let's just access this information end to end. Okay. For that, I'm going to copy one more command, which I already have. Here I'll paste it. And here I'm just going to give my variable, which is this one. So fundamentally here I have declared a variable, which is my URL. And here I'm saying again, go to this particular URL, which is this one. And this time use a header, which is authorization, and bearer is the keyword. And then you have to send the token that we have captured from here. Method is get, content type is application /JSON. Now here I will also just show what exactly we have received in data. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and click on run, and let's just see if we get any response. Perfect. You can see I'm getting the response. So here I will say data.value, and you can see I'm getting all the details listed here. Okay, so here it will not show properly, so let's just do this. Yeah, so you can see now I'm getting the data of Sentinel in PowerShell itself. Now with PowerShell, again, it's only the client credential flow as of now, which I have shown. There can be a number of different methods wherein you can have a user interaction as well, wherein you can use authorization code flow as well. But I'm showing this because in majority of the use cases, in majority of the testing, you might need to just make sure that you're getting access to the respective API and everything is working as expected. Then depending upon your requirement, you can choose the respective flow altogether. So now let's take a quick recap in terms of what all we have done in this particular video. To begin with, the very first thing that we have done is we have created an application. We created client secret, and then in Postman, we tested authorization code flow. Here, if I'll go back, here I've tested authorization code flow, then we tested client credential flow, and then in PowerShell, we tested client credential flow again. Now, this is the same method that I'm going to use with Python as well, because it makes things a lot more simpler, fundamentally speaking. However, at times there can be questions that why client ID and client secret is directly used in a script. Obviously, there are methods to protect that as well, which fundamentally means that, let's say, you can have a key vault in between, or you can use managed identity. Okay, so once we move along with this playlist, I'll show you all the other different methods as well. So this was all about knowing how to access Microsoft Sentinel API through PowerShell and Postman. In the next video, I'm going to showcase how you can access Microsoft Sentinel API with Python using Jupyter Notebook. So this was all about this particular video. If you think this channel is helping you to learn anything new, please feel free to subscribe and share this video with your technical community. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.